Rain slammed against the reinforced glass walls of the penthouse, turning the city below into a warped mosaic of light and shadow. From 40 stories above the streets, the skyline looked distant and unreal, as if it belonged to another world entirely. Sirens wailed somewhere far beneath, muted by height and wealth and power. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating steel towers and dark alleyways alike, reminding the city that no empire, no matter how fortified, was ever truly untouchable. Harrison Blake stood motionless near the window, a tall, immaculately dressed figure carved from restraint and calculation. The penthouse around him was less a home and more a command center. Concrete walls reinforced with steel, discreet security cameras hidden in the corners, encrypted screens glowing softly along one side of the room. Every detail had been designed for control. There were no family photos, no personal touches, nothing that suggested a life beyond strategy and survival. He had built his syndicate the same way he had built this fortress, layer by layer, mistake by mistake, paid for in blood and silence. Territory answered to him, men feared him, loyalty was currency and betrayal was paid for swiftly. His name alone could end negotiations before they began or start wars that burned entire blocks to ash. And yet, as he watched the storm claw at the city, Harrison felt the familiar hollow space inside his chest. Power-filled rooms, not souls. Behind him, the low murmur of voices echoed from the adjoining conference space. His inner circle had left minutes earlier, their faces tight with unease. Expansion had brought profit, but it had also brought attention. Rival families were watching closely now, too closely. Roots had been compromised, accounts leaked. 2 trusted operations aides had disappeared in the last 6 months, one defected, one buried. The third had tried to sell information and had begged for mercy with tears streaking down his face. Mercy was a weakness. Harrison had learned that lesson young. He adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit, the movement precise, controlled. Weakness invited predators. Sentiment created leverage. Family created targets. These truths had kept him alive long enough to rule. Still, the council was restless. Expansion made them nervous. Too many moving pieces, too many unknowns. They wanted stability. They wanted reassurance. And they wanted someone inside the penthouse who could manage the growing web of schedules, shell companies, encrypted ledgers, and territory negotiations without flinching or leaking information. He needed a new discreet operations aide. The thought irritated him. Trust was expensive, and lately it had proven worthless. The intercom chimed softly, cutting through the low hum of the storm. "Boss," his head of security said, voice carefully neutral, "the next candidate is here." Harrison didn't turn around. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, sharp eyes, unreadable expression, a man shaped by control. "Send her in." There was a pause, a fraction too long. "Her," the guard repeated, uncertain. Harrison's jaw tightened. "Did I stutter?" "No," the voice replied quickly. "She's coming up now." The line went dead. He exhaled slowly through his nose, irritation threading through his calm. Candidates blurred together these days, ambitious men with eager smiles. Women trained to say the right things, to flatter, to pretend fear didn't live just beneath their polished confidence. They all wanted proximity to power. Few understood the cost of standing this close to it. The elevator doors opened behind him with a soft, mechanical sound. Footsteps followed, slower than usual, measured, careful. Harrison turned. And for the first time in years, something inside him stilled. The woman standing at the edge of his domain did not belong to his world, not on the surface. She wore a simple dress beneath a modest coat, practical shoes instead of heels. No jewelry, no performance. Her hands rested instinctively over her rounded stomach, unmistakably pregnant. Very pregnant. The storm outside raged on, thunder rolling like distant artillery, but the room felt suddenly, unnervingly quiet. Her face was calm, though her eyes carried weight, hazel, steady, holding determination and something far more dangerous. resolve without illusion, fear without surrender. Harrison felt it then, not recognition, not memory. Something worse. A disturbance. He had spent his life believing that control was everything, that loneliness was the price of survival, that fate was a myth invented by people who could afford to believe in it. As the rain battered the city and the woman stepped fully into the light, Harrison Blake, feared dawn, ruler of shadows, had no idea that fate had just walked into his penthouse. And it was already carrying his blood. She stood near the entrance of the penthouse like someone who had learned not to take up space unless invited. The guards remained by the door longer than necessary, watching her, as if waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing did. Harrison Blake studied her in silence. Most people shifted under his stare. They filled the quiet with nervous words or forced confidence. She did neither. Her pregnancy was impossible to ignore. Not hidden. Not dramatized. Simply present. A reality she carried with calm dignity. It unsettled him more than fear ever had. He gestured toward the chair across from the desk. She walked slowly but steadily. Every step measured. As if she had learned the cost of rushing through dangerous rooms. She sat, hands resting over her stomach in a way that was protective without being defensive. He noticed everything. The lack of jewelry. The faint wear on her shoes. The way her coat had been mended rather than replaced. This was not a woman who wasted resources. You understand where you are? Harrison asked quietly. She nodded. Yes. No tremor. No apology. That single word carried weight. It told him she had done her research. That she knew exactly who he was and what this place represented. And yet she had still come. A suspicion stirred. Brave or foolish. He had buried both kinds before. Your resume says you handled logistics for multiple companies. He said, front businesses, charitable foundations, international scheduling. She nodded again. I am good at seeing patterns before they break. I notice what people miss. I fix problems quietly. Quietly. That word mattered. He leaned back in his chair. You are aware this role requires loyalty above skill. Mistakes are not corrected twice. I do not make careless mistakes. She replied. And I do not betray people who give me work. Her eyes met his. Steady, unflinching. The storm outside roared louder. Wind pressed rain against glass. The city below drowned in motion. Inside the room time slowed. He studied her face more closely. Something about her felt familiar. Not a memory. More like an echo. It irritated him. Then he asked the question others would have avoided. Why are you applying while pregnant? Her jaw tightened just slightly. Only someone watching carefully would notice. Because I need protection and stability. She said, for my child. And because I am capable. Pregnancy does not erase competence. The words landed hard. Not rehearsed, not emotional, just the truth. Harrison felt a flicker of something old and unwanted. Respect. Where is the father? He asked. The air changed. She inhaled once, then answered. Not involved. No bitterness. No tears. Just fact. I am not asking for sympathy. She continued. I am asking for opportunity. I will work harder than anyone you have tested. Because failure is not an option for me. Silence filled the room again. Heavy, charged. Harrison thought of the council, of the betrayals, of men who smiled while planning exits, of loyalty that cracked under pressure. And then he looked at her again, at the way she sat alone in a den of predators, carrying life, asking for nothing but work. Power recognized power, even when it wore no crowns. You will answer only to me, he said. You will hear things you cannot repeat. You will see things you cannot forget. I understand, she replied. He did not know why his next words came so quickly, why his instincts overrode caution. You start immediately. Her breath caught, just for a second. Thank you, she said softly. As she stood to leave, he felt it again. That pull, that disturbance under his skin. For the first time in years. Harrison Blake wondered, not whether someone would betray him, but whether fate had already begun its work. The first week changed the rhythm of the penthouse. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in ways Harrison Blake could not ignore. She arrived before sunrise every morning. Security noticed before he did. A quiet presence moving through reinforced halls with purpose. Never late, never hesitant. By the second day, she had reorganized the encrypted schedule system. By the third, she had flagged a shipment delay that would have exposed a laundering route. By the fourth, she had corrected an error in an offshore ledger that even his most trusted men had missed. She did not announce her work. She simply placed solutions in front of him. Clean, efficient, undeniable. Harrison watched from a distance. Testing, waiting. He assigned her tasks meant to break people. Cross-checking rival movements. Balancing territory income. Managing meetings that required nerves of steel. She did not flinch. Her pregnancy slowed her body but sharpened her focus. When pain crossed her face, she swallowed it down. When fatigue threatened her posture, she adjusted and continued. It unsettled him. Not because she was weak, but because she refused to be. The men noticed too. Whispers moved through the corridors. Why would the boss allow a pregnant woman this close? Why trust someone so vulnerable? Harrison said nothing. Silence was authority. At night, when the penthouse fell quiet, he reviewed her work alone. Every decision precise. Every move anticipating the next problem before it surfaced. She thought like someone who had learned survival early. That familiarity crept in again. Unwanted. Persistent. Late one evening, a conflict erupted between two lower factions. A potential betrayal. Voices rose through encrypted calls. Threats layered with old grudges. Before Harrison could intervene, she stepped forward. Calm, direct, unimpressed. She rerouted communication. Separated the aggressors. Stabilized the situation without violence. When the call ended, the room remained silent. Who taught you that? Harrison asked. Life, she replied. No pride, no explanation. He dismissed her shortly after. Watched as she gathered her tablet and coat, hands briefly resting on her stomach as she stood. The door closed behind her, and the penthouse felt colder. That night the storm returned. Rain streaking across the glass. Harrison stood once more at the window. Memory surfaced without permission. A bar. Dim light. A woman sitting alone. Eyes full of quiet exhaustion. He shook his head. Pushed it away. Coincidence was not destiny. He did not believe in fate. Still, he found himself calculating timelines. Counting months. Measuring the curve of her pregnancy against something buried deep in instinct. The next morning he ordered a background check. Not the standard kind. The kind that peeled lives apart. It came back clean. Too clean. No criminal ties. No hidden assets. No suspicious payments. Just a struggle, loss, and survival. The council called that afternoon. Concerned. Suspicious. They questioned his judgment. A pregnant aide inside the inner circle was dangerous optics. Harrison ended the call without reassurance. That night he stood outside her temporary office. Listening. She was alone. Breathing steadily. Reading reports aloud to herself in a low voice. He realized something then. She was not afraid of him. That realization carried more weight than fear ever could. And somewhere beneath his control. Beneath his rules. Beneath his iron certainty. The first crack appeared. Harrison Blake did not yet know why. But the woman he had hired while pregnant and alone had already begun to change the balance of his world. The city no longer slept beneath the penthouse. It watched, waiting. Inside the fortified walls the atmosphere shifted. Not in ways the guards could name. Not in ways the council could measure. But Harrison Blake felt it in the silence between decisions. Elizabeth moved through the inner levels now. No longer a visitor. No longer watched with open suspicion. Her access expanded because it had to. Too many systems depended on her hands. She learned the rhythm of the syndicate quickly. Which men spoke too much? Which men watched too closely? Which rooms required silence? She never asked why certain doors were locked. She never asked why certain meetings ended early. She accepted information the way she accepted danger. Without comment, Harrison tested her deliberately. He sent her into rooms thick with tension, placed her between men who hated one another. Observed, she diffused conflict with quiet authority, never raising her voice, never showing fear. It disturbed the balance. Men who ruled streets hesitated before contradicting her, not because of her position, but because she spoke with certainty. At night, Harrison reviewed security footage, not of enemies, of her, watching the way she paused when she stood, the way her hand instinctively found her stomach, the way she breathed through discomfort rather than acknowledging it. Something inside him tightened. The baby moved more now. Elizabeth felt it during meetings, during brief moments alone, during times when Harrison passed too close. Her body reacted to him, and she hated herself for noticing. His presence filled space. Cold, controlled, dangerous. And yet when he stood near her, the child responded. She told herself it meant nothing. Children reacted to voices, to vibrations. Still, she adjusted her schedule, avoided unnecessary proximity. Harrison noticed. He noticed the way she shifted when he entered a room. Not fear, not attraction, guarding. That realization unsettled him more than defiance ever had. The underworld council grew restless. Expansion drew predators. Rumors traveled faster than bullets. They whispered about an heir, about weakness, about a pregnant woman too close to power. Harrison silenced the conversation publicly, but privately he reinforced security, increased surveillance, moved pieces into place. Protection came naturally. Justification followed later. One evening, a coded message arrived. Intercepted too late. A rival faction had identified Elizabeth, not by name, but by condition. Pregnant, close to the boss, potential leverage. The words burned through Harrison with cold fury. He doubled guards without explanation, restricted her movement, assigned men to watch corridors she never walked. Elizabeth noticed immediately. "You are changing protocols," she said quietly during a late review. "Yes," he replied. "Why?" "Because circumstances change." She looked at him then. Really looked. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition without understanding. That night, Elizabeth stood alone in her assigned room. Hands on her stomach. Fear finally surfacing. She had entered a world that did not forgive vulnerability. And her child was no longer invisible. Across the penthouse, Harrison stood at the window again. Rain cutting across glass. Lightning splitting the sky. For the first time since building his empire, he realized control might not be enough. Not when fate had found a way inside. Not when something precious had stepped into his territory. and not when the storm outside began to feel like warning rather than noise. The memory came without warning. Harrison was reviewing shipment routes when it hit him. A scent carried by the ventilation system. Soft, warm, familiar. His hand stilled above the screen. For a moment the penthouse faded. The storm outside. The screens. The guards. All of it dissolved. He saw dim light instead. A quiet bar. Late. Nearly empty. A woman sitting alone at the far end. Shoulders tense. Glass untouched. Sadness clung to her like perfume. He remembered the way she looked up when he sat beside her. Not hopeful. Not flirtatious. Just tired. They had spoken little. No names. No promises. Loneliness had filled the space where conversation should have been. Two strangers choosing silence together. The memory sharpened. Her eyes, hazel, steady even then. Harrison inhaled sharply. He pushed back from the desk. Anger rising without direction. A coincidence. That was all it was. The city held millions. Women shared features. Time blurred details. He refused the thought. Refused the implication. Yet his body betrayed him. A slow, cold certainty creeping through instinct. He counted again. Days, weeks, months. His jaw tightened. Across the penthouse, Elizabeth sat at her workstation, unaware of the war unfolding in his mind. She felt it too. A shift in the air. The way predators sensed weather chain. His gaze lingered longer now. Sharp, focused. She avoided his eyes. Kept her head down. Fear whispered its warning. He was remembering. The baby moved suddenly. Strong, insistent. She pressed her palm to her stomach. Breathing carefully. Not now. Please, not now. That night Harrison stood alone in the war room. Lights dimmed. Screens dark. He let the memory play fully this time. The way her hands trembled slightly when she lifted the glass. The way she had leaned closer as if warmth itself were scarce. The way she had not asked him to stay. Morning had come quietly. Sheets cold. Room empty. He had been relieved. Complications were dangerous. Now the complication stood under his roof. Carrying life. Carrying possibility. Rage followed realization. Hot. Uncontrolled. Had she known? Had she planned this? Had she walked into his world deliberately? A suspicion warred with something worse. Doubt. Elizabeth was not calculating. Not manipulative. Every instinct he trusted told him that. Still the truth burned. The next day he watched her more closely than ever. Every movement. Every breath. She noticed. Of course she did. Her hands shook when she sorted files. Just slightly. He saw it. During a late meeting she swayed. Caught herself. straightened. Enough. Harrison stood abruptly. The room froze. You are done for today, he said. Elizabeth looked up, startled. I can finish this. No, he repeated. The command was final. She gathered her things silently. But as she passed him, their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, the truth surfaced between them. Recognition, fear, confirmation. Neither spoke. That night the storm returned heavier than before. Thunder shaking glass. Wind screaming against steel. Harrison stood at the window. Fists clenched. The universe did not play games. It punished arrogance. And he had believed himself untouchable. Now fate had found him. Not with bullets, not with betrayal, but with a woman who carried his blood, and a child who had never asked to be born into shadows. Harrison Blake had ruled fear his entire life. For the first time, fear ruled him. The collapse came without warning. Elizabeth was standing beside the central table, reviewing a route adjustment when the room tilted. Sound stretched. Light fractured. She reached for the edge of the table, but her hand missed. Her knees buckled, and the world went dark. Voices surged. Boots moved fast. Orders barked. Harrison turned just in time to see her fall. For the first time since blood had been spilled in his presence, he felt panic. He crossed the room in seconds, caught her before her head struck the floor. Her body was warm, too light, too fragile. Her breath came shallow. Get the car. Now, he ordered. No argument. No delay. They moved through secured corridors and underground exits. Sirens did not scream. Routes were cleared before they reached them. The clinic was already prepared. It always was. Elizabeth drifted in and out, her body reacting to stress she had denied for weeks. Harrison never released her hand. Doctors moved efficiently, quietly. Vitals called out. Fluids administered. Monitors hummed. The doctor finally turned. Face serious. Controlled. Severe exhaustion. Dehydration. Blood pressure elevated. Then the pause. The child. The doctor said, "The heartbeat is strong." Relief hit Elizabeth first. Tears slipping free. Then the next sentence landed. But she cannot continue under this level of stress. Where is the father? The room went still. Elizabeth froze. Her breath caught. Her secret balanced on a blade. Before she could speak. Before fear could shape a lie. Harrison answered. I am. The word cut through the room. Final. Absolute. The doctor nodded without question. Adjusted instructions. Issued warnings. Elizabeth stared at Harrison. Horror and realization crashing together. I knew. Somehow. He had always known. When they were finally alone, silence pressed down. Harrison stood beside the bed, hands clenched at his sides, control barely intact. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Since the beginning," Elizabeth whispered. The air tightened. "You walked into my territory," he said, "carrying my blood. And you said nothing." Her voice trembled but did not break. "I did not know who you were that night. I did not plan this. I did not ask for anything. You let me hire you," he said. "You let me stand inches from my own child without knowing." Her eyes filled. "I let you keep your life," she said. "You would have destroyed me if I told you. Men like you do not believe in accidents." The words struck true, and that angered him more than denial ever could. "You do not get to decide alone anymore," he said. Her hands moved instinctively to her stomach. "This child is not leverage," she said. "Not yours to claim like territory." The tension snapped. "I will not allow my child to be exposed, to be hunted, to be used against me." She met his gaze, steel beneath fear. "I will not allow my child to be owned." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Harrison exhaled slowly. The rage shifted, coiling into something darker, more dangerous. Possession. The underworld would sense weakness now. Rivals would circle. The council would demand answers. There was only one path that ensured survival. "We will marry," he said. Her breath left her in a rush. "No, it is protection," he continued. "Legitimacy, a security." For him. Her eyes closed. "You do not own me," she said. "I am not trying to," he replied. "I am trying to keep you alive." Silence settled again. Heavy, uneasy. Outside the clinic, the storm returned. Rain hammering glass, thunder rolling like distant gunfire. Elizabeth opened her eyes. "If I agree," she said, "this is a contract. Nothing more. Separate lives. Respect. No control." Harrison nodded once. "Agreed." The bargain sealed not by affection, but by necessity. As the rain battered the city, a new truth took shape. Harrison Blake had finally met something stronger than his empire. And it was growing inside the woman he could no longer pretend was a stranger. The city reacted faster than either of them expected. Rumors moved through the underworld like smoke. Invisible, choking, impossible to contain. A woman inside the penthouse. Pregnant, protected, close to the boss. Names were not spoken, but implications were sharp. Elizabeth felt it first in the tightening security. Guards doubled. Routes changed. Windows reinforced overnight. No one explained anything. They did not need to. She understood danger. She had lived her life avoiding it. Now it had found her anyway. Harrison became a constant presence. Not hovering, not soft, watching. His orders grew quieter, deadlier. Anyone who asked questions disappeared from conversations. Anyone who lingered too close was reassigned. Control returned, but tension remained. The council summoned him. Elizabeth knew before he said anything. She saw it in his posture, the way his jaw set, the way violence waited just beneath stillness. They are demanding answers. He said, "About me." She asked, "About the child." He replied. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. They will not accept uncertainty. He continued. An air without legitimacy invites war. She swallowed. "And me. You are leverage," he said honestly. The truth stung more than comfort would have. That night Elizabeth packed quietly. Only essentials. Only what she could carry. She moved slowly, carefully, not running, preparing. Harrison found her near the bedroom door. A small bag at her feet. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Somewhere quiet." She replied. "Somewhere my child is not a rumor." "No." His voice was calm, but absolute. "You do not get to decide that alone." She said. For the first time his control slipped. He crossed the room. Not aggressive, urgent. "If you leave, they will follow. They will find you." She met his gaze. Fierce, unyielding. "Then you should have let me stay invisible." Silence stretched. Harrison exhaled slowly. The kind of breath taken by men choosing a different war. "I will stand in front of them," he said. She shook her head. "You will choose power. Like you always do." He dropped to one knee in front of her. The movement stunned her. "I will choose you," he said. "Not the council. Not the syndicate. You." Her breath caught. "I will make them accept it." He continued. "Publicly, irrevocably. I will claim you. Not as property, but as family." Her voice trembled. "That is not protection. That is a cage." "Then change the terms," he said. She searched his face, looking for manipulation, for calculation. Found none. "I keep my name, my work, my choices." "Agreed. I leave if you ever use fear against me." "Agreed. Our child is not raised in blood." His jaw tightened. "Then, agreed." The bargain hung between them. Fragile, dangerous. Outside the penthouse thunder rolled. A storm echoing the one building inside the underworld. Elizabeth closed her eyes. "I am not doing this for you," she said. "I know," he replied. "Neither am I." The agreement was not sealed with touch. or promise, or love. It was sealed with understanding. That night Harrison Blake called the council. And for the first time since taking power, he did not negotiate. He declared the woman under his roof was untouchable. The child was his heir, and anyone who challenged that truth would not live to regret it. Elizabeth stood alone in the penthouse afterward, hand on her stomach, heart racing. She had stepped into protection, or into war. Only time would reveal which. The courthouse stood quiet and ordinary. That was what made it dangerous. No banners, no crowds, no ceremony. Just stone walls and neutral faces and men who understood silence. Elizabeth walked beside Harrison through the side entrance. Her steps slow, measured, one hand resting against her stomach, the other clenched at her side. Guards waited outside, not visible, but present. Protection did not announce itself. It simply existed. Inside the room, the judge barely looked up. Two witnesses stood apart. Men chosen for discretion, not loyalty. Harrison signed first, his hand steady, unemotional. Elizabeth watched the pen move, every letter sealing a future she had never imagined. When it was her turn, she paused, not from doubt, but from understanding. This moment changed everything. She signed. The judge spoke quietly. The words formal, final, husband and wife. No kiss followed. No touch. Harrison nodded once. Acknowledgement rather than celebration. They left the building the same way they entered. Unnoticed, uncelebrated. The city swallowed them whole. That night Elizabeth was brought to the penthouse permanently. Her former room erased. Her presence now undeniable. The space felt different. Larger, colder. Harrison showed her the master bedroom. Insisted she take it, citing comfort, citing safety. He took a smaller room down the hall, distance framed as respect. They ate in silence, silverware barely clinking. Elizabeth studied him across the table, trying to see her husband, only finding the boss. But small things changed. The next morning she woke to fresh fruit arranged carefully. No excess, only what she liked. Prenatal supplements waited beside tea. Not announced, not discussed. She noticed, said nothing. Days passed, then weeks. The marriage existed in structure, not emotion. Yet Harrison adjusted his world around her without asking. Meetings moved earlier. Weapons stored farther away. Guards instructed to soften their presence. Control rewritten as care. Elizabeth resisted letting it matter. She focused on work, on the child, on survival. Still, late at night, she heard him pacing. Sometimes he stopped outside her door. never entered, never knocked. The distance hurt more than pressure would have. Then the rumors turned cruel. A rival family liked whispers that she had trapped him, that the pregnancy was leverage, that weakness had crept into the syndicate. Photographers appeared at a distance, watching, waiting. Elizabeth found the articles first, screens glowing with lies. Her hands shook. She packed again, more carefully this time. When Harrison entered the room and saw the suitcase, something in him broke. Not rage. Veer, I will not let them touch you, he said. She met his gaze. Tired, worn. I will not let my child grow up hunted. He stepped closer. Slow, careful. Then I will end the hunt, he said. The next morning he stood before cameras, before rivals, before men who measured weakness. Elizabeth stood beside him, a hand in his. He spoke without hesitation, without anger. This woman is my wife, he said. This child is my heir. Anyone who believes otherwise may test the truth. Silence followed. The declaration echoed through the underworld. Unchallengeable. That night Elizabeth stood at the penthouse window, watching rain trace the glass. Harrison joined her. Close, not touching. I do not know how to be gentle, he said. She did not answer. But when the baby kicked, her breath caught, and without thinking, she reached for his hand. He froze, then let her hold on. The contract had begun as armor, but something beneath it stirred. Not ownership, not obligation. Something far more dangerous. A hope. The quiet that settled after the public declaration was heavier than any storm. It pressed into the penthouse like unseen fog. Not hostile, not calm, waiting. Elizabeth felt it in the way the guards moved more slowly, in the way doors closed softer than before, in the way Harrison no longer spoke in commands when she was present. The underworld had accepted the truth, not because it was gentle, but because it was final. Still, danger did not vanish. It only learned patience. Letters arrived without signatures. Warnings wrapped in courtesy. Threats disguised as concern. Harrison intercepted them all, burned them without comment. But at night he stood longer at the windows, watching shadows, listening to the city breathe. Elizabeth watched him from a distance, learning the shape of the man beneath the power. She saw how he removed his jacket before entering her space, how he slowed his steps so the floor would not echo, how he never sat until she was comfortable. These were not gestures taught by fear. They were learned through attention. One evening she woke from a dream she could not remember, her heart racing, her hand instinctively reaching out. It found him. Harrison sat at the edge of the bed, fully dressed, eyes alert. I heard you breathe chain, he said. She stared at him, confused, vulnerable. You do not sleep, she said. Not deeply, he replied. The truth settled between them. From that night forward, he stayed, not touching, not intruding, just present. The child responded to him now without hesitation. A strong movements, restless energy. Elizabeth began to speak to her belly aloud. About books, about quiet mornings, about safety. Harrison listened, never interrupting. One afternoon she found him in the nursery he had ordered prepared. No weapons, no screens, just soft light and empty space. I did not know what to put here, he admitted. She stepped beside him. We will figure it out. Together. The word landed hard. Unexpected. That night the rival family made their move. A convoy rerouted. A warning shot fired far from the city. Close enough to be understood. Harrison did not retaliate immediately. Instead, he changed everything. He shifted alliances, sacrificed profit, exposed roots that no longer mattered. For the first time, he chose defense over dominance. The council noticed. So did his enemies. Elizabeth sensed it in the air. In the way Harrison held her longer before meetings. In the way his hand lingered at the small of her back. Fear surfaced again. Not for herself. For him. She packed once more. Not in secret. Not in panic. When Harrison found the suitcase, he did not ask why. You think you are protecting me, she said quietly. I am, he replied. By leaving, she asked. By choosing the child over the empire, she said. Silence. Then Harrison knelt in front of her. Not as a boss, not as a husband by contract, as a man stripped of certainty. I do not know how to be anything else, he said. I was built for war, not peace. Elizabeth touched his face. Gently, firmly. Then learn, she said, or let me go. He closed his eyes. I am afraid, he admitted. The words changed everything. That night he made the call that ended the war before it began. He dismantled a rival through exposure, not violence. He protected without blood. The underworld shifted, not because it was forced, but because the balance had changed. Elizabeth unpacked. For the first time since entering his world, she slept without fear. Harrison watched the city from the window. Not alone, not empty. The empire still stood. Danger still breathed. But something stronger now anchored him. Not control, not fear. Love growing quietly, demanding courage instead of conquest. The night the child decided to arrive, the city was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No rain, no sirens, just a heavy stillness that pressed against the glass walls of the penthouse. Elizabeth was standing by the window when the pain came. Sharp, sudden, final. She inhaled once and knew. This was not fear. This was beginning. Harrison reached her side before she could speak. He saw it in her posture, in the way her hand tightened against her stomach, in the way her breath changed. Now, she whispered. Everything moved at once. Guards mobilized without orders. Cars rolled from hidden garages. Routes cleared. But inside the vehicle, nothing existed except her breathing and his voice. Steady, low, unbreaking. I am here, he said again and again. At the clinic, lights flooded the room. Doctors moved quickly. Hands guided. Voices instructed. Harrison did not let go. Time fractured into pieces. Pain surged. Receded. Returned stronger. Elizabeth gripped his hand until she thought bones might crack. He welcomed it, anchored himself to her suffering, as if sharing it could keep her safe. When the cry finally filled the room, it broke something open inside him. Raw, uncontrolled. Tears fell without permission, without shame. The nurse placed the child in Elizabeth's arms. Small, perfect, alive. Harrison knelt beside the bed, hands shaking, afraid to touch, afraid not to. She guided his hand forward. He felt the warmth, the weight, the undeniable truths. This was not territory, not legacy, not bloodline strategy. This was life. Oliver, Elizabeth whispered. Harrison repeated the name softly, as if learning prayer. In that moment, the world beyond the clinic ceased to matter. No council, no rivals, no empire. Only this. Later, when dawn crept pale across the city, he stood before the council cameras. Elizabeth beside him. Oliver cradled securely between them. His voice did not rise, did not threaten. This is my family, he said. I did not claim them out of fear. I chose them. The declaration rippled through the underworld, ending speculation, ending challenge. Months later, the penthouse no longer felt like a fortress. Sunlight softened corners. Laughter echoed where silence once ruled. Elizabeth moved frailly, confident, whole. Harrison learned new habits. Listening, waiting, holding. They renewed their vows quietly. No contracts, no witnesses who mattered. Oliver slept between them, unaware of the war he had ended before it began. One evening, Harrison stood watching Elizabeth and their son play on the floor, the city glowing beyond the glass. I hired you when you were pregnant and alone, he said quietly, without knowing the child was mine. Elizabeth smiled. And you thought you were offering protection, she replied. He shook his head. You were saving me. She stepped into his arms. Oliver between them. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, something rare held steady. Power had taught him fear. Love had taught him courage. And for the first time in his life, Harrison Blake knew exactly who he was protecting. And why.